So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Super excited to have you here. Got a few housekeeping items just to kick things off. So as we get rolling, you'll see a few different buttons at the bottom of your screen. The first one I want to bring to your attention is the chat box feature, which obviously a lot of you are already making use of, which is fantastic. Please continue that throughout the session. The more that everyone participates and communicates with one another and with us, the more impactful the session is and the more fun we can all have and the more knowledge we can all share. So the one next that you're going to see is the Q&A button. So if you do have actual questions that you want to make sure we can address, since the chat can get a little crazy at times, you don't want to get lost in there. But if you do have questions for myself or for Scott, either during the webinar that you would like us to answer at the end, when we have that chance and time in the session, put them in there. That way we can keep track of them and make sure we actually get a chance to answer all of them. We'll also be putting up throughout the webinar itself a handful of polls. Participation is totally anonymous. You don't need to worry about that when we share the results of them. But we'll ask a few questions. It just is a great chance to give us more insight into what you're dealing with right now. As well, at the conclusion of this presentation, you're going to earn your professional development credits. We'll share those codes both in the chat and in follow-up email after the session, because it will be, as I say that out loud, let me make sure I turn on the recording. Can't send you the recording if I haven't started it now, can I? Just give me 1 second here. There we go. Oh, sorry. I'm kidding. I already turned on the recording. I'm ahead of myself. No worries then. So everyone's going to get the recording at the end of the session. And again, those numbers for your professional development credits will also be there and in the chat. And then, yes, the session is being recorded, so we will send that out afterwards. So with that being said, welcome everybody. Today's webinar and session is brought to you by Bucketlist Rewards. We are the #1 employee recognition platform, and we're really excited to be with you here today, talk about rewards and recognitions in a whole person workplace. We also have Dr. Scott Behson here today with us. I'm going to introduce him a little bit on the next slide, but he is an expert on the whole person workplace and building better workplaces that work for everyone. We're super excited to have him here today. So quick intro to myself. So hi, I'm Victoria. I'm the marketing manager here at Bucketlist Rewards. I'm a cross-departmental marketing professional with over 5 years of experience developing strategy, operations, and content that effectively engages audiences throughout the customer lifecycle. Really passionate about marketing, technology, D&I, new communications frontiers, which I'm really excited to get to be a part of today's session and talking about the whole person workplace. My current bucket list item is reaching 1,000 books in my personal library, which, as some of you may notice behind me, is getting close. I'm currently at 197 books, so we're getting there. And I am joined today by Dr. Scott Behson. He is a professor of management at Fairleigh Dickinson University and is a leading scholar in work-life wellness and supportive workplaces. He's the author of 3 books. Most recently, The Whole Person Workplace, Building Better Workplaces Through Work-Life, Wellness, and Employee Support. Scott is an accomplished speaker and consultant who provides talks, workshops, webinars, and keynote addresses for some of the world's leading companies. He was a featured speaker at the United Nations International Day of the Family and the White House's Summit for Working Families. In addition to his many academic publications, his work appears on the Harvard Business Review, Time, Fast Company, Success, and the Wall Street Journal. Scott frequently appears in media, including NBC, CBS, MSNBC, NPR, Bloomberg Radio, and many business podcasts. Scott also recently helped launch Flex Friendly Certification, a process in which employers can assess their flex and brand themselves as a flex-friendly place to work, and writes a must-read newsletter on LinkedIn. It is must read. Scott's bucket list item is to travel to every continent, and he has just 2 more to go. I'm super jealous. That's definitely on my bucket list too. But that's enough about us. I'd love to get to know a little bit more about you in our audience today. So I've got a quick icebreaker question that you can all answer in the chat. But what was your favorite childhood TV show? Personally speaking, I think mine would be the Magic School Bus. I'm sure we might date ourselves as we start putting in what our favorite shows were as kids, but loving that. Definitely a lot of Rugrats. Arthur, yep, awesome. Growing Pains, Gummy Bears, Saved by the Bell. I love Lucy. Ooh, Scooby-Doo, love that. Casper, absolutely. Wonderful World of Disney on a Sunday night too. So good. Love that. Pinwheel, Punky Brewster. Fantastic. Loving all the different variety we've got going on in here. It's making me feel nostalgic. Like I want to curl up with some cereal on Saturday and just watch a bunch of these. Bananas in pajamas after my own heart. Love that. Awesome. So feel free to keep throwing those in there because it's so great to see all these different shows. And maybe again, I'll steal some recommendations. But for today's session, here's a bit of the agenda of what we're going to be covering. It's going to be really interactive. So again, I really want to invite you to put your questions in the chat. I can already see there's so much great participation. And, we're going to ask you some questions throughout. So feel free to chime in your thoughts on what we're talking about, questions you might have. Feel free to question one another if someone asks or gives a really interesting point. But for today's session, what we're going to be looking at is what is the whole person workplace? Why should you care? Why would you want to implement it? Strategies to move towards a whole person workplace, as well as how to use rewards and recognition as a tool in a whole person workplace. And then we're going to look at some of those key takeaways and answer all those great questions that I'm excited to see you all put in the chat. So we're going to kick things off and I'm going to hand it over to Scott, who's going to tell us what is the whole person workplace in the first place.
Great. First off, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for chatting and all the nostalgia, seeing all these TV shows. Anyway, the whole person workplace really comes out of the research I was doing for a book project where I was really actually initially focused on trying to, the initial title, working title was the family forward workplace. And I was looking more specifically at things like parental leave and a little bit of workplace flexibility and stuff like that. And I, was starting to write the book in spring of 2020. I lined up all my interviews for summer 2020. And of course, then the world changed, right, in the middle of March. And so in my interviews with chief human resources officers, business owners, CEOs, other business leaders and experts, I realized that what they were struggling with was how do I keep my business going during the height of COVID when we peak uncertainty? We did not know what was going on. But also they shared this concern about how do we take care of our people? And I think it's a recognition that a lot of employers really got at that time that maybe they hadn't thought of or wasn't as much top of mind before. Those two challenges, keeping my business going, taking care of my people, is really a single challenge. And I realized the scope of my book, just focusing on working parents, was too small. And based on what they told me, it expanded to thinking about employees, not just as a part of the machine, not just as a partial person who shows up for certain periods of time in a certain place, not even as an asset or a valuable asset, which is like what a lot of companies talk about, but really recognizing that employees are whole people. And this is a quote from a chief human resources officer I spoke with for the book, who said, and this is where the phrase comes from, actually, we have to realize we get the whole person through the door. We get their backs and their hands and their minds and their hearts, and that they're all different stages in their lives, and we have to make sure we're doing our best for them. And, that makes the insight that people, like an employee, is a whole person. They're a body, they're backs and hands, right? So we need to make sure, and especially at that time, physical safety, workplace hygiene, and other factors like that were really top of mind. But it gets to a whole lot of different types of jobs. If you work on an assembly line or in a warehouse or in a kitchen, or you're serving drinks, or you're, doing your rounds as a nurse, you're working with your body. And employers should be helping people be well in their bodies. And they can do that in a lot of different ways. People are also minds. So we need to give workplaces and work that people find interesting and motivating and is consistent with their priorities and helps them develop and learn and grow and progress. and stay engaged. And that's another big part of a whole person workplace. And then finally, people are hearts. We care about things, both in work and outside of work. We care for others. We are caretakers. We also have other priorities. Maybe it's volunteerism. Maybe it's our own passions or our hobbies or our other priorities outside of the workplace. And if you take a whole person mindset, what you do is you say, well, my employees aren't just a part of the machine, they're people. So I should support them not just in the workplace, but I should support them in their lives as best I can. And it opens up so many avenues for us to support employees with life challenges. And these can range from big picture, big programs like, multinational companies can have like these extremely wide benefit programs that fit almost in any eventuality, to small businesses who just make the right decision for that employee right there, and everything in between. So when I researched and wrote the book, I really highlighted so many positive examples of companies that were exhibiting some of this whole person workplace value set, even if they didn't recognize it that way or speak about it that way. And I wanted to show that it can be done in any sector. So like blue collar, white collar, hourly, salaried, doesn't really matter. A lot of these principles apply. It can be multinationals. It could be a 12-person food store in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. I interviewed both of those. And it can be done really on any budget. And the important thing is to start with the values and with your heart, and then see what you could do as you manage your organization. So that's kind of what I'm going to talk about today. I'll get more specific. I'll tell more stories. It'll be a little more interesting as we go on. But if you go to the next slide, this is kind of a bit of the kind of table of contents of what my book winds up talking about. But it's really a culmination of work and the experiences of dozens and dozens of companies. There's parts of it are about managing through and post COVID, and post COVID is probably not the right term, but you know what I mean. But like managing in a hybrid workplace is difficult, right? It's additional challenges. It's more complicated. Now it can lead to better results than the old way of doing things, but it's more complicated. So I talk about that. Getting the most out of workplace flexibility, parental leave, support for working parents such as daycare, and making sure that people have time for life and things like that. A wide range of supports for a wide range of concerns, including volunteerism, getting your credentials, getting your certificates and stuff like that, education, time for life, etc. The importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion in companies that are really doing it, not just talking about it. And then what I think is really most important, what we'll wind up talking about most today, is how do you embed whole person values into like what you do in management and in human resources. So how do you take these values and make sure that it's part of how you hire employees, how you onboard employees, how you design the work of a single employee and of your work teams? How do you make this part of your performance evaluation, part of your compensation, and of course part of that being your rewards and recognition as well. Support for employee health and wellness, as I mentioned before, and then how this adds up to a culture, and then some action steps that different readers can take within their spheres of influence, whether you're an HR manager, a line manager, an organizational leader, a small business owner, an individual contributor, or even a student. Things you could do going forward to maybe make whatever influence you can have in a workplace be a whole person one.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Scott. It's great to have that kind of context about what it is we're going to be talking about today. Caregiver support, absolutely.
Yeah, caregiver support is well in there. It's in the wide range of supports, and there's a whole section on sandwich generation and other caretaking. And frankly, I'm dealing with that right now in my life, so it's pretty top of mind for me.
Absolutely. So I'm going to transition us a little bit here and talk more specifically about how rewards and recognition have that impact in a whole person workplace. So we're talking about rewards and recognition. There's a lot of different areas that you can cover, but what I want to really focus in on are kind of two levels. There's this sort of macro level that looks at the wider angle, the big picture things, where we're going to talk about, things like celebrating big milestones, the things we all think of, like, oh, somebody had a birthday or a work anniversary, they had a new child enter their life, things like that, where we all think of those right away, like, oh yeah, that's something really worthy of recognition, worthy of rewarding them, worthy of celebrating. But we also want to think about things on the micro level as well. And that's where we're going to talk about things that are a little bit more minute, but still really valuable and important to celebrate, because that's what truly brings that concept of an entire person and celebrating and rewarding and recognizing that entire person into your workplace. And that could be things like they completed a course that they've been working on for a long time. Maybe they've gotten their accreditation. Maybe they bought a new car, or, maybe they don't have kids, but they just got a new dog. And it's about recognizing and rewarding the things that matter in each individual person's life, and not making kind of the assumptions of everybody gets rewarded and recognized for the same things, because there are some basic things that everyone can be, but then it's really important to consider that what matters to each individual is a little bit different, is going to change based on their circumstances and their experiences. And so we want to be incorporating those diverse values and circumstances in when we're building out a rewards and recognition program. Um, the other piece that I really want to touch on here to share is that it's also about providing an opportunity for not just the company to recognize your employees, because that's great. That's a great starting point from a culture building perspective. You're going to you're showing people, you're setting the example, but it's about giving all of your employees the capability to recognize and reward one another, because employees, individual contributors especially, are going to know one another on a different level than management will often know your individual employees. They're going to know, like, oh yeah, Jan, she loves motocross racing, and Kyle is like an avid knitter. And those things that aren't always shared all the way up the chain, but can be really worthy of, recognize, like, hey, Kyle finished that whole sweater this weekend and it was amazing, and he gave it to his sister and it was great. Recognizing those little things that aren't necessarily part of the workplace, but become a part of who that person is, and then letting them explore that and bring that whole aspect of themselves into the workplace really brings the idea of using rewards and recognition into that entire whole person workplace. Love that, Becca. Yes. And I know there's lots of great things to recognize about you. And where we bring a lot of that in, of course, is that our platform is incredibly customizable. Yeah. How do you get that granular with employees and get managers too as well? Fantastic question. I think we'll probably address that closer to the end, just because I think I probably could talk about that for the rest of this webinar and we could just do nothing else. But yes, that's a fantastic question. If you could throw that in the Q&A. But yeah, one of the things we do with our platform to support all that is that it's super customizable. You're able to put in whatever awards you want. Everyone can do their own recognitions and say whatever they want to recognize. You can even tailor the experiences that you're giving employees to your particular culture and your organization. So it's the kind of things that your employees care about. They could say, hey, we all really love skydiving. That's like our passion. We wish we could do that every weekend. Cool. Why don't you put skydiving in as an experience that then they can redeem their rewards and recognitions for? So I don't want to dive too deep into this, because again, could definitely be talking about this for ages and ages, but just some kind of high level pieces that we can think about when looking to incorporate how rewards and recognition can really support, grow, and sustain a whole person workplace. So I want to kick things off here as well. I know I mentioned these a little bit earlier, but we do have some polls for you. And if I could get this to move to the other screen, I can't. So I'm going to have to start the poll. Actually, Becca, could you toss the poll up for us? Daily kudos, absolutely. Recognizing things on a day-to-day basis is a huge, huge factor.
Can I jump in just a little bit, just to build on a couple of things you said, Victoria?
Please do.
Yeah. So first off, I think you could think of rewards and recognition in a narrow sense, right? That somebody hits a KPI or a goal, or it's a work anniversary or whatever, and there's a formal opportunity for rewards and recognition. Or we could think of it as a kind of bigger, right? That we're recognizing, right, in a broader sense. And So, just, there's one anecdote that I do share in the book, and this is actually, I personally witnessed it. I was in a competitive co-ed softball team right after college. One of my teammates had just gotten a new job, and she had just graduated college. She was a D1 softball player, and playing softball was really important to her post college to like connect her to like, you know, what was important in her life. I'm sorry. Do you want to talk about the poll, and then
No,
I
I
can.
just saw everybody put in their yes in the chat, and I didn't want to lose that for them. So I just wanted to make sure that was up for them.
So while you do that, I'll tell the rest of the story.
Please
But it was
do.
really important to her. But during the interview process and the onboarding process, her boss learned about how important the softball team was to her. So the next, game that we played, we go out to the bar afterwards, and when we go to settle up as a team, the waitress is like, "Nope, the bill has been paid for," and the bill was paid for by my friend's boss, who found out where we go after softball games, and for the cost of a couple of rounds of beers, gave such recognition, right, to her, that we value you not just for what you could do for us at work, but for all the things that are important to you, we recognize. And I think that's just, a very instructive example of how recognition can be bigger than we sometimes think of it.
Absolutely. And I see here in the chat 110% talking about when it should not be tied to KPIs alone. That's one of the things we'll touch on a little bit later, but is this concept of there's the quantitative, yes, you hit your metrics, you've got your checklist of things done. Fantastic. Absolutely don't want to not recognize those things. But there's also this more qualitative, like, hey, you really support your team. You always come out for the people around you. You help make this a better workplace. Hey, you cheered me up today in a way that, maybe someone else wouldn't have taken the time to do. It's recognizing those sorts of things on top of course, your standard workplace KPI type pieces that are going to really have that impact long term on your business as a whole. So I love that that's already coming out in the chat. Fantastic. Perfect. So I think we're good with the poll. So yes, we'll make sure you all get a copy of our playbook. Because yeah, it does go into this kind of concept a little bit more, topic, the whole person, how recognition and rewards can support that. So we will send that to you after the webinar. So thank you all for doing that. So now we're going to move into our fireside chat. So really excited to get this started. We're going to kick things off with, shockingly, another poll. But I want to know, I'm going to launch that, but thinking of your current workplace, do you already have a whole person mindset in place? Kind of on a scale of like 1, no, we've never even considered this. We are definitely not pulling in all of what a person is, to 10 of like, oh yeah, we definitely have this kind of mindset in our workplace right now. You might not know that it's called that. Maybe you didn't have a label for it before, and now there's like, oh, there's an actual like specific phrase that means what it is that we try to do in our workplace. Awesome. Yes, absolutely. It's about bringing your entire self to work, to your work, your authentic self, the whole self. Love that. Awesome. Definitely seeing a range. So I think a lot of people are kind of in that middle zone of like, yeah, we definitely have some version of this, or we are striving towards it, but maybe not like it's not 100% there. Maybe not everyone's adopted it, or it's not across every area of the organization yet. Might be very HR led at this point. I'm sure that's something we're all very used to. Awesome. Okay. Perfect. So I'm just going to share those results with everybody so you can kind of get a picture of where everyone else is sitting. So yeah, definitely a lot around that like 5, 6, 7 mark. So awesome to see that it is something that people are already incorporating into their workplaces or are seeing as a part of their current culture. Fantastic. So with that said, we're going to move into our first fireside question, which is actually going to be about this poll. So Scott, does anything about this kind of breakdown or results surprise you?
No, actually, I think the fact is that there are a lot of well-meaning people and managers out there. So I'm not surprised that there weren't a ton of ones and twos. But I think, really making this a concerted effort and a strategic effort all going in the same direction is really hard. Or at least not so many organizations have done it in a this consistent fashion, so not that many nines and tens. But I'm not surprised there's a lot of sixes and sevens out there in the world, because there are a lot of good managers, a lot of good HR professionals. There's an increased recognition these past few years, right, about how work and life influence each other. And part of that was things we learned in 2020 and 2021. A lot more recognition that the importance of emotional and mental health for our employees, things like burnout, and also just, we've been through the ringer these past 3 years: anxiety, depression, loss. Um, and, people still aren't their full selves in a lot of ways. And, I think a lot of employers have figured out the way to attract and retain and keep really good people is to make sure that we're paying attention to them. Again, not just as a number and not just as a part of the machine, but as an actual person. So, yeah, I think there's more recognition of this as we go.
Awesome. So, catch as you can. Yep. Absolutely. It is. I think you're exactly on the nose there. And I think our audience is kind of really concurring with that, that it's, yes, we care about it, we want to do it, but we don't quite have that strategy or system in place to make sure it actually happens, and that it's a cohesive effort across the entire org. Um, so I want to start off with this question with you, kind of in your experience. We're talking about, like, yeah, there's not this strategy, there's not this maybe concerted effort where everybody's involved. How do you actually make that happen? How do you implement that framework throughout the entire team and the full organization?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing, and this might be the missing ingredient that keeps it from being kind of as spread as it could be, is that I think you really need to think through what your values are, and articulate those. And I submit that some of those values should be around, um, that we value our employees as people, beyond just their contribution to work. You could have other values as well in there, but I think it's important that we start with values, and then you think about, just like anything else, um, if this is really something you value, it shouldn't just be an add-on, like we're doing this extra wellness program or this extra work-life program, or this, or we're going to do yoga, a couple of yoga sessions, and we check that box. Like, it's not an add-on. The value should be then embedded in what you do. And in, it could be decisions large and small. And so I know a lot of, one question I've gotten from people who've read the book, or I've worked with their organizations, is how do I get started? Like, this seems like a big thing. And I'm like, well, you start where you are, and you keep marching towards it. And, progress is progress, and you start where you are. And again, these could be really big, like starting an EA, partnering with an EAP program, or things like that, or it could be something really small. Just one example of one company, they had all hands meeting every morning at 8:45. This is recent, but pre-COVID. I don't know what they've done since, but they had a 8:45 all hands meeting, and one of their employees, this is actually somebody I knew, had 4 young kids who had to go to 4 different places in the morning. And he went to bed every night with a pit in his stomach and stressed out about his next morning, getting everybody up, ready, going, this, drop off here, drop off there, blah, blah, and getting to work for the 8:45 meeting, which he would get at 8:53 and be all stressed out. Anyway, so after a little while, the boss pulled him over after the meeting. It's like, what's going on? And he told him this story. And the boss was like, oh my God, I never thought of this. I would never want to do that to you. From now on, the meetings are at 10. That costs no money, no investment. That's just listening with some empathy and figuring out a solution that works. So you could start there, or you could do something like what Adidas did when they opened a facility in a new city, and this is in Germany. But they were transferring, in addition to hiring locally, they transferred employees in from lots of different places. And what they did for all the relocating families, and think about the disruption to your life, right? Of moving, especially if kids, you're uprooting your support network around your family. They bought ahead lots of slots in summer camps, sports programs, and things like that for the children of the families who are relocating. taking that pressure off of them, right? One less thing they need to worry about when they have this big transition going on. That actually costs some money and was planned and more formal, but you could do things in big ways and in small ways to do that. So, but again, it's starting with the values and maybe even articulating those values, working with your employees about what these values are. I think that's also important. And just to take a quick um, side issue here, but when we're thinking about what our hybrid workplace looks like, what are our values? Do we more value the close collaboration and other things that might require more time in office together, or do we really value employee time for life, where maybe that would be less obligation to come in, right? Um, but we start with the value and we make decisions based on those values, and that leads us to a better place than if we are kind of just not doing it with a concerted effort in mind.
Absolutely. I love that. And I think part of that where it really starts, right? As it is for most most tech adoption, most culture adoption, most any change in any workplace, it does start usually at the top. Um, Definitely anybody at an organization can bring this kind of concept in, can bring this kind of culture and mindset into their workplace. I think consistently we see that like if it's going to be successful, it starts at the top or you get that buy-in from leadership that it's
Yeah,
going to become a genuinely adopted, fully embraced part of the culture for the organization.
yeah, yeah,
So
absolutely. When top management buys in, things can really move. Now I'm seeing in the chat, these are more managerial issues, right? Getting to really talk to all your people every day and getting to know them so you can do this customized recognition and other things. And that's incredibly important. But in addition, like getting when top management buys in, that's when things can really accelerate in a large sense. And a great story of that is I don't know if you know about they're widely recognized for their workplace flexibility and everything else. It's a financial services firm called Ryan, based out of Dallas, Texas, and although they're national and international in scope now, but the chief human resources officer was like trying to push this like hard working like 60 70 hour a week workplace to get more flexible, and was trying to do this for a long time and using data and look at what we'll save in turnover, look at what we'll save in this. And the boss just wouldn't hear it. He was like, that's not how we want to work. That's where we're going to lose money. He wouldn't trust the numbers. And then one day, this kind of junior manager at this organization, um, who was a favorite of the CEO and was like this was kind of ticketed for a really accelerated career. She comes into the CEO's office and with a tear in her eye saying, I love my job, I love this company, but I'm starting a family. Here's my resignation. I don't see how I can make that work here. And that's what got the CEO on board. And then very quickly, within 2 years of getting everybody on board, not just HR, but like getting line managers from around the company and top leadership involved, they led this whole cultural transformation. And now they're a results-only work environment where people can work from anywhere at any time. And this was back in 2008, 2010. Um, and they're, on the Fortune 100 best companies to work for every year. Their success is accelerated in so many ways. Their customer service is better. Their employee turnover is better. Their employee satisfaction is better. They're financially doing so much more business and more profitably than they ever did before. Um, Once the CEO got on board, and actually during the COVID years, Fortune actually, sorry, Glassdoor um, did us. I don't know how exactly they did it, but Brent Ryan was named. They used the CEO was named the #2 most effective CEO during the COVID crisis. And it just shows what you do when top management really buys in.
two questions
But
out of the chat
yeah,
here.
yeah,
One, so what company is that? Just so we can actually have like a
Ryan, Ryan.
okay, straight Ryan. Love that. So I'm seeing a couple of similar questions, and I think this kind of really ties into this concept here is that How do you actually bring this up to management? Like what strategies can you do to get them bought in? Because obviously, you've got that leader, that CEO who's like, the numbers. I don't know if that's right. But obviously that worked at Ryan when, it took that person with a real genuine concern to like flip that switch. How can you do that without necessarily having to have somebody come in with a resignation letter?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's the brain, sometimes it's the heart, and it kind of depends on what, you know, who you're trying to persuade, I suppose. But I think the big metric you could probably look at, right, is turnover. And Ryan went from 32% turnover to like 6 or 7% turnover. That saves an awful lot of money, right? And think about all the disruption to your workplace and customer service and things falling through the cracks and everything else when you have high levels of turnover. So that's probably the most top of mind metric that you can show. Now, if you're in a large organization where you do good data analytics, you can really boil this down, right? You probably have some departments where turnover's low, employee engagement's high, satisfaction's high, productivity's good. Other units where things are not as good. And you can probably dive in and see what the managers are doing differently or what policies are being implemented differently there. So thankfully, we're getting better data to make it more particulate. But yeah, I mean, it's a difficult challenge, but it depends on who you're trying to persuade. Um, and the other thing is, if you're a publicly traded company, right, there's a more short-term time horizon. So sometimes leaders don't want to make an investment that will help in the long run if it costs more money in the short term. But if you're privately held or other things, you don't maybe have some of those same concerns, and those leaders might be more willing to make a longer term investment. You might also want to just get permission to pilot some stuff, and that that's not that many resources, and then it's up to you to prove that this works and it can work if we scale it out.
Absolutely. And I love that question, Michelle. Throw that in the Q&A. I think we definitely want to touch on that when we get into our end session where we can actually address some of those other questions because that's a really good one. Um, I'm going to bring us on to our next question here, Scott. So, we talked a little bit here about like implementing it and getting that buy-in, but once you actually have it in place, or maybe you have, you're like a 6, 7, 8, you feel like you've got some of it, we're getting there. How do you actually grow that and make yourself an 8, 9, 10? Or and how do you sustain that once you get to that level?
Yeah, so it's embedding things in that in aspects of your workplace that aren't as obvious is number one, and then number two is it's like sticking with it. We've all been in organizations where they big announcement, we're going to do this differently, and then it just kind of fades away, and then we change something else later on, right? You really need to stay with it, and so it can't be a one-off, it can't be an add-on, and that's really really important. I think so some of the non-obvious things that we can embed this into, right, is how do we hire, right? What are we looking for in people that we hire, right? We might be looking for certain personality traits or certain communication styles, or certain backgrounds that might show certain qualities that would help promote a whole person workplace. How do we onboard our employees? Do we just talk about work and give people their keys and their whatever, or do we spend 2 days on culture and then set up 25 lunches for the new employee over their first 3 months to meet lots of people and to build their internal networks, right? These are things we could do, right? And also things like just even like how work is distributed. If like Victoria, if you're the only person in your organization who does a certain thing, or you're the only person who is in touch with this particular key client, you can never really go on vacation without checking your phone, right? Or whatever else. But if things are distributed into overlapping teams or you have overlapping responsibilities, people can step in and step out. People could take a parental leave without overloading everyone. People could go on vacation and unplug. Um, and that takes some conscious effort, right? That's maybe not obvious, but is really important below the surface. And the thing is, it takes, if you really need to change a culture from one thing to something significantly different, it's going to take about 3 years or so of concerted effort for people to really believe that this is the new way of doing things. And I started in the years before I wrote this book, when I was a little more focused on parental leave and work family specific things. I worked with a lot of companies who were frustrated that men weren't taking parental leave. And so they called me, and I was one of the few guys working in this area. And they're like, "How do we do this?" And I'm like, "Well, you need to, people need to see that somebody was brave enough to take an extended, a guy was brave enough to take an extended parental leave, that he was supported in it, that he came back and his career continued. And they need to see another person do that. And they need to see another person do that. And they need to see another person do that. And they need to see another person do that. And maybe on the 10th or 12th one, a lot of people will start saying, hey, maybe this is how we do things, and maybe this is supported. But the trick is, getting to that 10th person, right? That you can then highlight that example and do other things. It takes time, right, to change the perception there. Because if you can talk, I mean, so many companies, every mission statement's this lovely thing. Everybody wants to be the employer of choice. Everybody cares, blah, blah, blah. And show me, and so that's how you maintain it and build it out over time.
Absolutely. And I think it really ties into the idea that like it's not just about the the talk is the easy part, right? Like once you get that, you're like, yeah, we're on board with that. And exactly that. People want to say like we're the best place to work and we love our employees and we want them to feel loved and all of that. But so much of the pieces that make that happen are behind the scenes, those little things. And kind of tying into one of the questions that we had in the chat here, they don't necessarily have to be investments. They're not necessarily things that cost so much as they are putting systems in place that support all those. For example, being able to take a vacation, having your processes documented,
Yeah.
having a really good documentation process in place enables that. Because if
Yeah.
you don't have that, that person can never leave. They feel uncomfortable, they feel stressed, they can never go on vacation.
Yep.
And
And
it's all
so,
those little things.
yeah, so Ryan actually, whenever they get named to the Fortune top 100 to work for, the whole company gets a week off, except for like the most emergency, whatever. But their clients know it ahead of time and everything. And I was talking to the chief operating officer about this, and she was like, she was so tempted to jump in, and she had to stop herself because she's like, I have to show that we're really doing this. And so it's important leadership shares in with this. Just one other example, and I was looking in the chat just a little bit. It doesn't have to be the big policy necessarily, right? It could be smaller things. And again, this is the 12-person general store in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. During, they were open through the height of the pandemic and everything. And, they had a tip jar there when people were coming to pick up their stuff because they were only doing pickup at that time. And but the employees themselves felt like, we want to give back. So they went to the boss and said, can we turn the tip jar into a donation jar for the local food bank? And the owner was like, that's an amazing idea. So they did, right? So first off, just recognizing by saying, yes, that idea that you have, that priority you have is something I'm going to say yes to and is a priority for me too. And it turns out the owners matched the donation jar every week. And they wound up, it was something like the equivalent of 80,000 meals or something were donated through this over the course of a year. And that's recognizing, right, that what's your priority as an employee is also the employer's priority. And in this case, they did match the donations, but they, that was something that was just saying yes to an employee suggestion, which is a great way to recognize people.
Love that. So I do have another, like, I want to make sure we get a chance to touch on this so we don't forget afterwards, but I want to chat about how maybe that does differ in a remote/hybrid environment because, all of these programs, all these things can differ when it's that in person and you have those water cooler moments that people talk about versus that hybrid environment and that online environment fully. Um, but I want to tie that in a little bit with the next question. So I'm going to bring us into that one as well. So we're going to kind of tie these together. But how that flexible environment impacts the whole person workplace, and then maybe we can transition that into this next piece, like how R&R, how rewards and recognition actually is a part of that.
It's funny. I was just talking about this today. For everyone there, I taught my human resource management classes this morning. I'm still in my university office, and we were talking about this very issue. and how remote and hybrid work for some people is awesome. They love it. And some people don't work well that way. And and then there's sometimes disconnect between management and employees of what they like and what they do well. Um, I think that really at heart, a whole person approach is, let me listen to this employee, let me have some empathy, and let me see if there's a creative solution, right? So some employees might need more of the togetherness of an office than others, right? Um, Newer employees, those who are just hired, probably need to be around more, at least initially, to build those relationships and things like that. That's looking out for them as individuals, right? And the thing is, it's one of my favorite quotes in management. I wish I came up with it. Uh, Tim Hall is the pioneering work family researcher who came up with this. And he said, what we need are less rigid forms of flexibility. So a hybrid workplace that is like everybody in Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and everybody home Wednesday, Friday, probably isn't getting the best out of a hybrid work environment because that's not customizable, that's not flexible, actually. Um, Whereas workplaces that can maybe have teams make decisions for themselves, or there's some flexibility around what days and times and things people need to be in or be together. You mentioned, Victoria, that you have some hours where everybody has to be online together, right? So that there are those touch points so people don't drift away or feel alienated. There's lots of, I mean, this is super complicated, and we could do a whole webinar on this. But I it makes things more complicated for people who shape workplaces like HR professionals and managers. But if we're going to get the best out of this kind of new hybrid way of working, we have to really think about how do we build adaptability into what we arrange. And I think that shows a recognition for um, what people find important. And if I gave one more, I had done a workshop with a local organization on this kind of issue, and they had a real split in their workforce. They had people who'd been working there happily for 20 years, who loved like going into the workplace, having lunch together, open doors. They never called each other on the phones down the hallway. They walked to each other's offices. And about half their staff, however, had been hired since 2020. Most of them onboarded in a fully remote environment and now working in this hybrid. And like neither of them were happy with this kind of like half-time hybrid approach because it's just like the compromise. And so all I did, I was the facilitator really, was but we recognized like what is good and what is valuable about this approach and what is good and what is valuable about this approach. Not you're wrong, I'm right, but like here's what we should recognize and value, and that's important to you. Here's what we should recognize and value, and that's important to you. How do we make sure we're valuing everybody's concerns, right? Because we want to make it work for as many people as possible. So I don't know how they landed on it because I just kind of facilitated them kind of embarking on this process, but they put a working team together and all this other stuff. But you know, it, it goes back to it's going to sound a little out of left field here, but good communication means you communicate in the way that's best for the person who's receiving your communication, right? So that's how we should manage, right? And actually, that's how our employees should deal with managers too. If phone calls and personal one-on-one meetings is important to your manager, even though you like to work on Slack and not come in all that much, you have to meet your manager too, right? That's how you're valuing them as a person and as a manager. So it kind of goes all the way around, which gets to a point I know you wanted to talk about today, is that recognition shouldn't just come from managers. It can be built peer to peer. I think recognition can be built from clients and from others. The award that people feel most great about here at Fairleigh Dickinson is one that is voted on by students, not recognized by your dean or by your department chair or even by your peers. And there's ways to build that in, right, as well.
Absolutely. And I think that ties it all together really is the idea that words of recognition it's a tool at the end of the day to help reinforce the behaviors and the values that you want your workplace to embody, that brings all these pieces together. Um, Having a flexible words of recognition program that does meet all those very different needs, whether it's, hey, maybe a parking spot as a reward is not the greatest for people that don't come into the office all the time. But you have that flexibility and the tool to have that as an award, but also a half day off or things like that. They're like, hey, that's going to be something that's still really impactful for someone that is in a remote environment. That's still a really good reward for them. So it's about offering and considering those different values, those different areas that matter to people. And I think, yes, as a whole, it really all ties pretty nicely together, that it's about having a system in place to help reinforce all of those pieces that you start building on. It's a tool to help continue that going. But I want to make sure we have a chance to address some of these Q&As. So key takeaways, we're going to skim them a little bit, mostly because you're all going to get these slides afterwards anyways. And realistically, it's what we've talked about this entire last hour. But yeah, it's really just about, there's no one size fits all. It's got to be customized to your people and what they need and what they value and what matters to them, and finding out what matters to them and having those conversations, because by having those conversations, you're going to keep on going, and it just keeps building on itself, which is awesome. Also have some of my gems in there for incorporating rewards and recognition programs into that whole person workplace and how they kind of tie in together and support one another. So we've got those in there. Got some polls for y'all still, so didn't think we were done with those, I hope. We've got a quick poll here. I'd love to know, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much did you enjoy today's webinar? Love it. Lots of 10s. Awesome. Fantastic. I'm glad that it seems like a lot of you really enjoyed our session today. And I'm really excited to jump into our Q&As because we've got a handful of good questions. And I know I've seen some of them coming up in the chat. So that's awesome. Thank you all for joining. This has been fantastic. Awesome. Okay. So I want to jump into the other question I have. Bit of the classic, gotta ask, gotta talk about it. But I'm here from Bucketlist Rewards and Recognition. So we mentioned a bit throughout the course of this session, but rewards and recognition as a platform, something that's actually built for you, not something you have to try and manage and figure out on your own, and it's inconsistent and not everyone's doing what they need to. So we're really passionate about helping you find ways to reduce turnover, recognize the amazing work that you and your staff are doing, and just work together to build that whole person workplace, leveraging our platform. So I'm going to throw up a quick poll here for anyone that would like to learn a little bit more about us and actually see a demo of our platform. So feel free to pop that in there. We'll follow up with you afterwards. And then we're going to get into the very exciting Q&A portion. Oh, just kidding. Got a quick thing from Scott here that I want to make sure we have the chance to share. So I'll leave that poll up and we jump over to Scott here just to give a final shout out for some of his stuff.
Yeah, if I could just have 30 seconds to plug some stuff. But first off, if anyone here on this call would like to follow up on anything here, there's my Gmail address. I'm very findable on LinkedIn, and I'm very happy to connect with you there. I have a newsletter you can subscribe to on LinkedIn, where I kind of take this whole person mindset, but then kind of like as current things and news happens, I kind of comment on things there. If you found this useful so far, have I got a book for you? And you could go to Amazon or wherever you buy books. Whole Person Workplace, Scott Behson. I really believe in it, and I've gotten amazing feedback from it, from many employers who have been able to use it. Also, Victoria mentions that I've helped launch a new company called Flex Friendly Certification, where if you undergo a very user-friendly assessment, where you're filling out surveys, and we get a couple of employees as well, you can get certified and get this official badge as a flex-friendly employer. So you can maybe stand out when you're looking for new employees, you stand out in the job market as an employer who is really committed to flexible work. And if you're interested in that, flexfriendlycertification.com would be a good place to go. It is cost effective. It is user friendly. Okay, that's it.
Awesome. Okay, gonna end the poll. Quick questions from in the chat. No, I'm about to share the codes, and yes, we will share the whole slide deck with you after this, so that you'll have all of these links. You don't have to worry about copying those down. So here is your code. I'm just going to type it into the chat, so that way you can copy it. And again, you will be getting these slides and all these codes, and everything will be in your in the follow-up after the session.
Yeah, I'm getting something from the chat about someone who is interested in Flex Friendly and asking me to reach out to them. Please go to the website. There's a little contact form, and we'll be in touch.
Perfect. Okay. So again, if you didn't get this, don't worry about it. You're going to get it afterwards in an email. But I want to jump in because we have a few minutes left and we don't have a ton of time, but we're going to do our best. Okay. So, some of these questions are a little bit based on when we were talking, so I might have to jump by one of them. Getting too personal, too inappropriate. I'm going to assume that was talking about trying to learn like your hobbies and recognizing those things in someone's life. Because again, not everyone wants to be recognized for everything. Some people don't even want their birthdays recognized, and that's absolutely fair and reasonable. But some people don't want the big shout out that they had a child. Maybe they want to keep that private into themselves and things like that. So how do you kind of balance that personalized aspect with like
How
reasonableness?
how you recognize that whole person who wants to keep things private is by respecting their wishes for that. Some people want work to be more transactional and whatever, and then traditional rewards and recognition is perfectly fine. And we respect people's preferences.
Awesome. Love that. Yeah. One of the questions we have is how do we get granular with employees and then have managers be responsive to employees?
Well, again, individual managers or small business owners can have those conversations and get to know people over time. You might also, the HR department might want to survey people on certain things in an anonymous way, so that, and also you can somewhat demographically figure some of these things out too. Like if you have a lot of 20 somethings in your workplace, they might be interested in things like student loan repayment help and time for life. And if people are in their 40s or 50s, they might be in the sandwich generation, and they might be concerned about paying for college tuition and that taking care of your mother in hospice, and there could be supports for that, right? So getting to know people personally, but also you can do it in a systematic way too. You can ask what people are. It's kind of similar to when most organizations start a wellness program. They try to do some health assessments, right, of at least segments of their workplace, so they could direct the resources where it'd be most effective.
Fantastic. I know we're pretty much on time, so I know we'll do a couple minutes past just to answer some of these questions if you are able to stay. If not, again, you can follow up with us afterwards and we'll do our best to continue conversations. I know all of you have been absolutely fantastic. So much great participation, and these questions are fire. Love them. So fantastic. So again, we'll stay a couple minutes later to answer some more of these questions if you are able to stay. So we've got another question on, are there suggestions for words of recognitions that can be used by nonprofit organizations that may not have funds? I will answer that one. Abso-freaking-lutely. There are so many great ways that you can still give people, one, recognitions themselves. They're free, right? You're still just recognizing somebody by stating explicitly out loud that this person did something awesome and this is the awesome thing that they did. When it comes to the reward side of things, there are a lot of different things that you can do that have no cost whatsoever. You can do things that are minimal low cost, like days off, where it's cost but in a time sense rather than like an actual financial sense. But you can also do experiences at the company, like maybe they get to pick what the team outing is going to be next month, or they get to choose the music that is played in the office for that day. There's a lot of brainstorming fun things you can do. I know we have one of our customers, you were able to, they're a pharmacy, like a biochemical company or something like that. I want to say it was biochemical because it was about naming a goat. It was not like an animal testing, but they had goats in their lab. And one of the rewards is that you got to name a goat in their lab, which I still think is fantastic. Fantastic reward. I would save up for that all day.
Can I mention one thing I do in my classroom? The first day
Yeah.
of class, I hand out a sheet and just pass it around the classroom, and every student can write down 2 or 3 songs they like. And then I make a playlist from their songs. And before class, during break, and after class, I play their playlist. And it creates a good mood. But the reason I did it is I was thinking about what I wrote in the book, and I'm like, how can I put some like recognition, right, onto something that's important to them, which is music. And when you're 20, like music's very important to you. And students really love it, and I think it creates like a mood, and they see that I see them a little bit, and that makes for a better experience.
Absolutely. I know our CS team works with a lot of different organizations with every possible range of budget. So they definitely deal with a lot of that kind of, yeah, how do we do this when we don't necessarily have budget to put towards it? And then companies that are like, we have an endless budget, like send everybody to the Taylor Swift concert. Nobody can afford to go to the Taylor Swift concert.
There's
Awesome.
Taylor Swift on my playlist that I can say.
Love that. Awesome. So I think that kind of ties in as well to the other question that was around like if you're having budgetary issues, what can you do with a small investment? It's about finding those like smaller pieces to get started. And when it comes to your culture and recognizing people and just listening to them, all of that is totally free. That doesn't need any specific budget investment. How to recognize sales staff and non-sales staff when the leadership team is focused in metrics-based recognition. So I think we were touching on it a little bit earlier. It's that idea of there's that quantitative, which is a very traditional approach to recognition and to just workplace appreciation in general is very quantitative and metrics focused, but that the whole person workplace is about getting into that qualitative. Do you want to touch on that a bit, Scott? Like how you would encourage them to move beyond that initial like KPI based only?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, again, there's a bit of a trap that like the revenue generators get the recognition and the staff don't, right? But it just this might seem a little far afield, but a lot of organizations have moved from traditional performance reviews to like these app-based systems where people put in their performance milestones and they can coordinate with their manager right away. And there's almost always a place where you can recognize a coworker for having helped you or whatever, and it shows up to them on their part of the app, and it shows up to their supervisor on their part of the app too. So I mean that's just one way to get some maybe peer recognition, and maybe that's one way the sales staff can help direct the recognition to the staff people that are helping them in lots of different ways. That's just one thought that came to mind. But again, uh, a wider range of stuff, right? That's what we've talked about already. It's don't just, if we only recognize the top salespeople, what are we saying? We value someone for the return on their investment pretty much only. And if our recognition system doesn't include other things in that, that's what we're saying that we're valuing, right? We need to make sure we value that because that's, we need that, but we should, we got to think about it in a more holistic way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one last kind of question slash comment that we'll use to kind of wrap this session up because I think this is really poignant and important to touch on. Some companies have union employees, so it can be challenging for those companies. It can be difficult when union members and their reps are, there's a lot of very tight lines. It can get very heated at times when there's a perception of unfairness or favoritism in the workplace when some people are recognized, but not everybody, or if they feel like there's some discrimination going on. So I think that's a really important point to address.
It is. I mean, every organizational context is going to be different, so the contours of what you could do would be different. Maybe this does limit some of the but it probably doesn't limit things as much as one often thinks. High performance work anniversaries, team based or organization based recognition, might be things you'd have to emphasize more than you know, you know, this person had a baby and these people don't have babies and therefore it's unfair. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly part of it is that by incorporating the entire whole person is that you are recognizing that like you need to go beyond those standard awards and recognitions of, hey, so and so had a child, but you also have to have recognitions for people that will never have a child, like again, like they got a pet or they completed a course or all these other life milestones that are also really important and are just as important to those individuals as like the societal assumed important milestones. So having those helps with some of that sense of unfairness, and sometimes the idea that there can be the fact that there can be discrimination within that. It inherently is. People-based systems have those, unfortunately, but it's where having systems in place, like a platform that kind of lets everyone take control and everyone can recognize one another, can really help alleviate some of that, because it's giving everybody that, they have their hands on the wheel the same way. It's not just, oh, it's only management picking their favorite people to give shout outs to all the time. When everybody gets to shout out one another, can help alleviate some of that.
Yeah, people are more attuned to unfairness when things are scarce or not given out very frequently. When everyone feels that they can participate, people are less attuned to unfairness. Although, human nature.
Yeah, there's always going to be some people, but I don't think there's much you can do out there that doesn't have that. But that's exactly right. And where the more that you have that culture of recognition and that culture of appreciation and constantly making it a part of day to day
Yeah.
business, it reduces those kind of like, well, so and so got that special award and I didn't get that. It's okay, because
Yep.
everybody gets stuff all the time and it's just normal day to day behaviors. Um, so awesome. Awesome chat. Thank you everyone so much for joining us. There's still a lot of you on the call. Thank you so much for staying for the extra like 7 or 8 minutes here. It's been fantastic chatting with all of you, and we'll be sharing again the slides, the recording, whole kit and caboodle with you after this. So you'll have all of this great information and the recording itself. So yes, thank you all so much, and have a wonderful Thursday and a great week. And thanks for joining.